Good morning. I'm Sherman Stanford, and this is Making Sense of the Chaos. And we do have chaos, you can see. It's all around us. I don't know if God was displeased with us and keeping us off, or if perhaps it was Satan. However, whoever it was, we're on now. This is Thursday morning, and on Thursdays, our practice is to go over the basic framework that we use for understanding God's world through His eyes. And if you're not going to try to understand God's world through His eyes, then you're going to understand it very poorly and piecemeal, and you aren't going to be able to make systematic sense of any of it. And if you don't want to make systematic sense of any of it, well, that's up to you. But I'm here to try to help you do that if that's what you want to do. The first principle to bear in mind is that God created the cosmos for His glory, not for the glory of mankind. But lest men despair that they're unimportant, our second principle is that the jewel of creation is mankind, which makes man extremely significant, but as a creature, not as God Himself, not as the center or the purpose for which creation was made. Creation was made for God and His glory, and man has a huge role in glorifying God, but it is always subject to God's will, His decrees, and His glorifying Himself. Third, and this is a bone of contention with some people, and I admit it's a mystery, and I don't think anyone has answered it very well. I think it's a mystery because it goes beyond our capacity as fallen creatures to understand. And that is that although in no sense the author of evil, God, as the sovereign creator of all that is, having a single plan for His creation from beginning to end, ordained Adam's fall. This did not come as a surprise to Him. He did not have plan A and then plan B. Now, in fact, Adam's fall was entirely part of His plan. Now remember, God intended to glorify Himself. Now, how is He going to glorify Himself in all of His attributes if there's no fall? How is He going to glorify, for instance, His wrath, which is part of who He is? Look at Romans 1. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven. That's what it says. It's the wrath of God. You say, well, I don't like that picture. Well, okay, good. Then, dial up God today and say, God, I really don't like the idea of your being wrathful. And I'm sure He'll change His mind about that, since certainly you're in the inner councils in His determining His plan for the universe, aren't you? I know I'm being a little sarcastic and facetious, but sometimes we deserve it when we start acting like, well, I don't like God being this way, or I don't like God being that way. God is the way God is. And what we have to do is figure out who He is and who we are and how we're supposed to relate to Him on this earth. What is our role? When are we in violation of what He says we ought to do, and when are we complying? Because if we don't understand those things, we have a problem. Not God, we do. But how is He going to glorify Himself? By glorifying His mercy and His grace, for instance, if there were no sinners needing redemption. You say, well, that sounds pretty extreme. God would create human beings for that purpose? Yes. Read Romans 9. He said that He created some as objects of His mercy and others as objects for His wrath. Vessels for destruction. That's what He says. And you say, well, my goodness, I had no idea God was this way. Well, that's because you haven't been reading the Bible. Read it. Don't read it and through the lenses of what some modern preacher is telling you. Read the Word itself. That's what it says. I don't like it. Well, that's what it says. So, all the human beings on earth vote God out of office, and surprise, surprise, He's still God. Fourth, in Adam the entire creation fell. All of humanity, at that point, which of course was just Adam and Eve, but all of humanity to come, which would be their descendants, Abel and Cain, and then Seth. And we're not told about the other descendants, but we can assume there were many others, because by the time of the flood, there were many, many people on the earth, and Adam and Eve both lived to be well over 900 years old. How long was Eve productive in bringing babies into the world? Well, I don't know, but if we do a proportionality there, if a woman is fertile between the ages of, say, 13 through 40, generally, and she lives to be 80, then that would suggest that Eve was fertile from the age of 13 through about 450. How many babies could she have had in that time? Well, does that mean she had one every year? Well, no, but it also doesn't mean that she didn't have twins occasionally. I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. It's just pure speculation. But also the creation fell when Adam fell. Not just humanity, but the entire creation. Remember now in Romans 8, Paul talks about the creation groaning, awaiting redemption, its restoration in Jesus. Well, didn't he restore the world at his resurrection? Well, yes and no. It's the already and the not yet. So in principle, it was restored, but finally and completely, no. That doesn't happen until the judgment day. 5, as a result of the fall, God pronounced the curse of enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Who are these people? Well, they're the two great divisions of humanity that exist from that day until the end of time, the judgment day. There will be two great divisions of humanity. Christians often refer to the world and believers as being these two distinct units of people, and that's true. And that is a rough equivalent of the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, with the world being the seed of the serpent and the church or believers being the seed of the woman. Anyway, there's enmity between these two, and the ultimate victory will come for the seed of the woman, because the seed of the woman, it is predicted in Genesis 3:15, will crush the head of the seed of the serpent, and we see that theme played out over and over in the Old Testament. For instance, when in the book of Judges, oh man, these names go zip right through my head. But when the woman drove the tent peg through the head of the enemy of the Jews, this was an example of crushing the head of the seed of the serpent. And this great antithesis, which is what this is, remains in place until the end of time. And we cannot overlook that. You cannot, as a Christian, treat as a brother someone who belongs to the seed of the serpent, someone who is an enemy of God, someone in the world. Now, you're required to love them. That's the form your enmity has to take toward them. You're to love them. You're to teach them the truth. You're to demonstrate the truth in your life. You're to be kind and patient and gentle with them, defending yourself where you must. Of course, you don't allow them to kill you or your loved ones, but you do demonstrate love and kindness toward them in whatever way possible. Now, they're going to be trying to literally kill you. And if they can't get away with that, they're going to try to undermine you in whatever way they can. That's what you see. That's what you see. I mean, if you saw Attorney General Barr the other day and how he was treated by those leftists on that judiciary panel, that was a perfect example. Now, do you think those people would have shot him dead if they could have gotten away with it? I think so. They would have shot him dead. Do you think Nadler would have shot him dead? Nadler would have shot him dead. Well, that's a terrible thing to say about Chairman Nadler.
He was Cicero, by the way.
Huh?
Cicero.
Cicero, yes. Cicero. That's correct. That was when Deborah had been the one and only woman judge in all of the history of Israel. And sometimes people use her as an example to prove that women can be leaders in the church. But if you have one example to the contrary, but you have many, many statements opposite to that example, then she is the
Exception.
that proves the rule. She's not the exception that makes the rule. Okay? It started like years ago when I was running a whole lot. My pastor's wife, who was a nurse, or an RN, she used to bring articles from newspapers or magazines about runners who had died while running. And she was always a little dismayed at my response to that, because I would say, "Oh, how reassuring. It's not very dangerous." And she'd say, what do you mean? They died. And I'd say, yes. Well, bring me the articles in the newspaper about the couch potatoes dying while drinking beer, eating potato chips, and watching ball games on television. There aren't any news reports of that. And I said, precisely. And the reason is because it's not news. It happens all the time. So the fact that you're bringing me this means it's news. It doesn't happen very often. Anyway, getting back to what we're supposed to be talking about. All subsequent human social experience, history, after Genesis 3:15 is an expression, one way or another, of the enmity between the two great divisions of humanity. Got to remember that. Seventh, the unregenerate, those who remain hostile to God, are without excuse. Paul tells us in Romans 1 that they know God, but suppress the truth about God in unrighteousness. It is a culpable self-deceit. They are guilty. And it isn't that they don't know enough. We have a tendency when we're bringing the message to unbelievers to think, well, if I can just tell him enough, he doesn't know enough. Oh, no, that's not the problem. Paul tells us that. But besides that, if you were converted yourself after the age of 10, and certainly in my case, I was 35, I know that I knew who God was, who Jesus was, and that was not the problem. The problem was that I had a hard heart. I did not wish to submit myself to his authority, and I would not do so. By the way, we're right side up on this thing now.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
It hasn't changed over here yet.
Okay.
Maybe momentarily it will. How long? A few minutes?
I just noticed.
Praise God. Hopefully it was.
I don't look at myself when I'm doing these. Maybe when I was young and I thought I still looked kind of good, I might have, but no, not. There's nothing wrong with my face that a good iron couldn't fix.
Right now, it's still like confused. It may appear this, but this is symbolic of this ministry. Hopefully, turn the world on its side.
That's right. Actually, upside down.
Upside down.
That's right. Anyway, the last point I would have you bear in mind is what Paul told us in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 at verse 18. He said, and you need to remember this, that the word of the cross, the gospel, is foolishness. In fact, the word he used is in Greek is the same root word for moronic, to those who are perishing. And so when you bring that word to someone who's an unbeliever, he's not only going to believe that the word that you're bringing him is foolish and moronic, he's going to believe you are. And that should not dissuade you from doing it. I put this down because, frankly, this is an important point to me. I hate to confess this, but I really don't like people thinking I'm a moron. Now, I often think I'm a moron, and that's okay. but I don't want other people thinking that. And probably you don't want people thinking you're a moron. But if you're going to preach the truth, people will think that of you, and you just have to accept that. So, all right. That's hopefully that will give you a perspective from which to view all of creation through God's eyes. This is how God sees us, how he sees the world. This is what he made. All right? Now we're talking about eschatology, and we've gone through all of the eschatological positions that are held, except for postmillennialism, and we're pretty much done with that too. Today we're going to discuss the rapture. The rapture.
Not the rapture.
Yes. Bill's in a rapture because we're going to discuss the rapture. He looks just like Snoopy, dancing. He's just having a wonderful time. I'm teasing. Postmillennialism teaches there will be no secret rapture of believers out of the world before the judgment day for many reasons. So there it is, up front. No rapture before the judgment day. Now, if we're talking about getting, people meeting Jesus in the air, yes, we believe that's true. That's the Bible teaches that. When does that happen? On the judgment day. Well, wait a minute. That's not what most people believe. No, it isn't. But I'm going to make the case for why that's the truth. Okay? All right. Give me a little time. First, if we hearken back to Jesus' last words to his remaining 11 disciples in Matthew 28, okay, this is just before he ascended into heaven. He first commissions them to go out and evangelize the world, right? He says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go ye therefore, making disciples of all the nations, teaching them to obey all the things I have taught you. And then what does he say? By way of encouragement, to bolster their spirits and to assure them that they cannot be defeated in this great commission, he tells them that he will be with them always until the end of the world. That's pretty strong, right? Some may argue that Jesus was speaking only to his immediate disciples. He wasn't talking to you and me and all the generations that have existed since then and will exist until the judgment day. That has not been the belief of the church over the ages. That simply is not the orthodox belief. Moreover, it simply is nonsense to assert that Jesus was only commissioning the men standing before him. This is the last time he was going to be on the earth before his final return. Do you think he would have neglected to tell all of the people coming and to intend that message for all of those who would exist thereafter? Something they needed to know, that they needed to be doing. I mean, wouldn't he give the most poignant and important and powerful message right then? Wouldn't you have? Yes, you would have, and he did too. His words can only be assumed as instructions for believers of all time to come. Now, the word end in this passage is translated from the Greek word sontaleia, which is used only 6 times in the New Testament. In each case, it means the judgment day, the full end of time. Surely he was not offering encouragement that he would be with his followers in heaven. When he says, I will be with you until the judgment day, he wasn't saying, I'm going to be with you in heaven. I mean, if they're going to get wafted out of the world at some point, raptured out, why would he be telling them, I will be with you until the end of the age, until the judgment day? I mean, is he telling them, don't worry about it, I'm going to be with you up in heaven after the saints all get raptured out of the world? That doesn't make any sense. They and their successors needed not only encouragement, but to be reassured regarding the power by which they would discharge their commission on earth. I mean, if you were given that great, and you are, don't you need to know by what power you're going to discharge it? If you go out to preach God's word and you think that you're preaching it in your own power, are you going to feel that you can do this? That you can change people's hearts in your own power? You're a fool if you do. And the overwhelming likelihood is that you're going to become extremely discouraged and you're going to lay down on the job at some point. I mean, that mule just isn't going to go another step further. And if you've ever had to work mules, which I didn't do much of, but a little when I was a lot younger, if you overload a mule or you overtire a mule, he doesn't just get complaining and balky. He flat quits. He ain't going one step further. You can whip him, you can do what you want with him. I mean, there's a reason that people say, oh, so-and-so is stubborn as a mule. Yes. Yes. Horses can be stubborn and balky, but no, they're not like mules. Oh, no. No, 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 no. Those are a whole other dimension. Furthermore, it would be superfluous and misleading for him to encourage his followers by telling them that he would be with them until the judgment day if he knew they were to be raptured out of the world prior to that time. No, the period of the commission was until the judgment day. That's clear. I'm commissioning you until the judgment day. This is what I want you to be doing until the judgment day. And I'll be with you until the judgment day. In full power. I'm giving you full power, my power, and I'll be with you until the judgment day. Not until you're going to be wafted out of the world, raptured out of the world at some point before that. No, that's not what he's saying. All right, so now we're going to get to the specific passage that deals with the rapture. That's 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and I contend also the first 10 verses in chapter 5.
We're gonna edit those together.
Okay, well, now we're back on.
That's its commercial break.
It was a commercial break. We had a call, and I think it's a call in our life. And so we need to answer the call. We thought it was Jesus calling, but turns out it wasn't.
Was it for a warranty? You said warranty?
It could have been. Could have been. Anyway, Mark Duncan, who was my pastor years ago, and a good fella, was fond of saying a text without a context is a pretext. He said that a lot of times. And I memorized it even if I wasn't trying to, just because I heard him say it many times. Anyway, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 16 and 17, which premillennialists use as their major proof text for a secret rapture prior to the judgment, is a case in point. The chapter divisions which occur after verse 8, which occurs after verse 18, is a human construct. That's what you have to understand. Look, Paul did not write his letters with chapter divisions. There were no chapter divisions. There were no verse counting. They were not numbered. He just wrote a letter. Now somebody later on, and this was in the last several centuries, they put the chapter divisions and they also divided them up by verses for convenience sake. And it is convenient. But it's by no means divinely inspired. It's just a human addition to God's Word. And we need to regard it as so. So just because there happens to be a chapter dividing things. I mean, Bill, we've been going through the book of Romans several times now. We have included the end of one chapter and the first paragraph in the next chapter as the same subject, have we not? Yes, several times. And we're only in chapter 10. So already several times we've seen that the arbitrary division of the text by a chapter really didn't need to be where it was. It should have been somewhere else because it broke up a topic right in the middle of the discussion.
But you know, the early church fathers, they didn't have cut and paste. They didn't have Max. So.
Well, no. They didn't have concordances and they didn't have...
They didn't have us.
They didn't have us. I mean, my goodness. Obviously, they were severely hampered. They were just way smarter than we are. But what's that compared to? Anyway, to properly understand any text, whether biblical or not, it is necessary to consider the entire portion of the text dealing with the idea under consideration. In this case, the chapter divisions are not part of Scripture and can be safely ignored, thus treating the first 10 verses of chapter 5 as part of the topic under discussion. Verse 13 sets the context in perspective. It says, "But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope." So Paul is talking about the concern that people had for those who had died. Now remember, Paul didn't know when the judgment day was going to come. He didn't know anything about that. He didn't know how long it was going to be. But he knew that there was a concern in the church about people who had died because as far as they understood, Jesus could have been returning at any time. And what happens to these people? They're dead. So he's setting their minds at rest regarding that question. Now, Lorraine Bettner explains the subject, quote, and in 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 4, which follows immediately after the passage from which dispensationalists think to derive their doctrine of a secret rapture, okay, immediately after that, there's a chapter break. The first four verses read, but concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have need that ought be written you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. Now, has he taken up a new subject? Wasn't he talking about this same idea? So the day of the Lord, what is the day of the Lord? Well, it's the judgment day. And now he says, and listen to this very carefully, when they, now who are they? From the context, it's clear, he's talking about the world, the seed of the serpent. When they are saying peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall in no wise escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. This passage shows that instead of the righteous being taken away before the judgment day, they are here right up until the time the wicked receive their punishment, at which time the righteous receive their reward. Where have we seen this before in Scripture? Let's think for just a moment. Yes, Matthew 13. Jesus' parable of the wheat field and the wheat and the tares, remember? As corroboration of this understanding of Paul's message here, Jesus' parable of the wheat and the tares presents the exact same picture. Both wheat and tares grow together until the harvest. Then the tares are gathered up first, not the wheat, to be burned. Additionally, so that there would be no doubt of his meaning regarding the wheat and the tares, Jesus explained the parable to his disciples. He answered, quote, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. Now, what is the world? The seed of the serpent, right? And the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Could he have been any clearer in this direct statement, from which no inference is required to understand the meaning? Believers and unbelievers will coexist together until the end of the world. There will be no secret rapture prior to the final judgment. Don't wait for Jesus to waft you out of the world. He's not going to be rapturing you out of the world before the judgment. Your job is here fighting the seed of the serpent until your death. And then you will be followed by other people doing the same thing until they die. And they will be followed by even other people all the way until the judgment day. It is a mighty chain of believers. It's the temple of the Lord. It's the structure of the church. You are a brick in the wall of the church. And you're important. But you're not the whole deal. You're just another brick. And you do your job as a brick. And you do the best you can until God calls you home. And then somebody else picks up the burden and carries it until he dies. That's the way God set it up. That's our job. There can be nothing greater for you to do with your life. And looking for Jesus to rapture you out of this great responsibility, this great commission, this great privilege is nonsense. It's unfaithfulness. It's clock watching by a worker who should be busy doing his task, not looking at the clock. Anyway, Bill, do you have any questions about this? I see we've reached the end of our time. In fact, we've gone a little bit too long, but I wanted to finish this subject.
I figure you're going to say wait until looking at the clock. Nothing really to add. It's going to be a late upload to YouTube because when I get back from school, which is almost over, I'll have to edit the two together and put it on YouTube. Lord willing, it won't take forever like it did Saturday.
All right. Well, then we'll see you tomorrow. I hope you'll see us anyway, but I'll be here tomorrow. And if Satan doesn't keep us offline, we will be online at 7. Today we were a little late, which kind of explains why we took a little bit long on the back end. because I didn't really take longer than I was supposed to. I just got started late. Anyway, remember,
You reclaimed your time?
I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time. That's right. Wasn't that nonsense? I mean, you ask him a question, he starts to answer, and it wasn't really questions, it was attacks. You know, and he starts to explain things, and I reclaim my time. Shut up. I don't want to hear what you have to say. Yes, this is a hearing. I mean, what do you do in a hearing? You hear,
Listen,
right?
Right?
Yeah, you hear. Well, they didn't want to hear anything you had to say. No, this was an opportunity for them to air their little.
Dog and pony show, the little circus.
What I told Bill this morning is they sounded bitchy. I use that word advisedly, but they did, didn't they? They sounded like whiny people. I mean,
there ought to be a law against bitchiness.
yes, and that's what it was. That's what it was.
Actually, there is a law. I'm sure it's what God put forth.
Yes.
How we should treat each other.
Well, it certainly isn't loving one another, is it?
Well, it's not.
Oh
No.
my goodness, that was. Anyway, and you may be on the other side of this issue altogether. Look, the truth is, I put no faith in Republicans or Democrats. As I've said before, the Republicans are in favor of bringing us to hell more slowly. The Democrats want to do it quickly. Now, if I'm given a choice between going slowly and going quickly culturally, I want to go slowly. But look, neither one is the solution to our problem. Our problem is we have turned away from God. That's the whole deal. And until we turn back to God, we're going to have this problem. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. You don't stay at the same point. You're either moving toward God, you're either reforming, or you're falling back. It's one or the other. Anyway, let me be done with this. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, fellow believers, there are worse things than dying, and the very worst of all is being unfaithful to God. God bless you.